Welcome to Cast on Crit Purifying Flame Inquisitor, a spicy build capable of taking on the hard endgame content, a build that keeps getting cheaper by the day as Vulconous stocks are falling faster than a meteor from the heavens, a build to save you from your poor decision to start an unoriginal 2-button build of BFBB playstyle simply because it's an overpowered mechanic. Because what beats 2-button builds? That's right, my friend, 1-button builds. The science couldn't be clearer. Spin to win is in PoE League. This build has been made well-rounded to take on both mapping as well as bossing content. So if you came for a ZHP, pure DPS build that cannot map properly without a cast-on-death portal setup, well, my friend, this build is not for you. Likewise, if you're a hardcore gamer, this build is also not for you, because even though it is quite tanky, it is not immortal, and you will be tilted on a DC that you will die to. This build goes out to all my party people who just want to play and enjoy the game in all aspects. Now let's break down the build bit by bit. Welcome to the in-game portion of this guide. We are going to take it step by step in going over the gear. Now to start off with, Vulconous. This dagger is huge for the build because it has a lot of flat damage, it has good stats like percent crit chance, and percent damage to our attacks against ignited enemies. So, this dagger gives us a lot for Inquisitor because of Battle Mage. Outside of Battle Mage, this isn't a very good caster weapon. With Battle Mage, it becomes an extremely good caster weapon. So, this weapon itself, I believe, will drop like a hot rock into prices. I think within 4 to 5 days, this weapon is going to be less than 10C and should be very affordable for most people. If you cannot afford Vulconous, however, for the majority of my time leveling through yellow maps all the way into early red maps, I simply used a rare weapon that I bought for about 1 to 2 chaos that had good crit chance and like okay attack speed and an open prefix, and I crafted spell damage on it. So just do that until you can afford the Vulconous and you should be fine. Frankly, by the time you get to yellow maps or red maps, you should have enough currency to afford Vulconous anyways. Besides Vulconous, the other expensive item that we definitely be dropping in price is Xoph's Blood. This gives us Avatar of Fire, and it gives us cover enemies in Ash. Until you get this amulet, just use a rare amulet with like crit multi, life, and you simply will be having this Timeless Jewel over here, and that way you can grab Avatar of Fire before you get this amulet to give you Avatar of Fire. So that's one change you'll have there. Next up, our helmet. We use Crown of the Inward Eye. This thing will be dropping in price. I think very soon it'll be a 5C unique basically, or maybe even cheaper. It's a very common drop from Awakener, one of the most commons, maybe only beaten out by the gloves perhaps, and it gives us a lot of life, a lot of ES, and a lot of extra damage from the Transfiguration mods. It gives us damage for our percent mana and our percent ES, which we get a decent amount of. So, very nice helmet there. And I would recommend the Cyclone attack speed enchant if you can get it. It's very helpful for our cast on crit procs. Eventually, with 14% CDR, which we have currently, you need to get an attack rate of about 7 to get maximum procs. We currently are sitting at, I would think, around 5 something. Yeah, 5.2. If we proc our Onslaught Flask per se, we go to 6. If we add in Tailwind, we'd go to 6.6. If we added in like a Torrent Reclamation, we'd go well over 7. Stuff like that gets you close to maximum procs on your cast on crit. After the helmet, we're looking at the Oak Shield. This should be very cheap. Simply buy a Nature's Resilience Prophecy and use it on a Springleaf Shield. This prophecy is very easy to do. It's in the Act 2 area that's right below the town. I'd highly recommend it. The shield gives us 6% regen and up to 150 life. This is very huge for an Inquisitor because Inquisitor benefits doubly from the percent life regen. And since we're using Petrified Blood, plus Righteous Fire, we always are at low life, and thus we're getting both the 3% from regular regen and the 3% from low life. So it's a huge shield that allows us to sustain Righteous Fire and then some. So that's the reason for this shield here. After that, we use Alori's Lantern. This is just a really cheap a ring that gives us some res, some movement speed, some chaos res, and the important mod of making it so enemies' hits on us are unlucky. Now you might think this ring has no life, therefore it's a bad ring, but actually the unlucky stat is quite helpful in mitigating damage because, say an enemy attacks you, the attack will be rolled twice. If they hit for 500 and 600, the damage they deal will be 500, so it picks the worst of 2 rolls. So on average, this ring is quite a decent amount of damage reduction here, and it's a pretty cheap unique ring, so you can pick it up for 1 elk and it'll benefit you quite well. Besides that, we just have another ring that has a life, resistances, and accuracy. I should state, it's important to get accuracy on at least 2 pieces of gear. I have it on my gloves and my ring. On our build, we get about 3k accuracy. If you have below 3k accuracy, that means you probably need more accuracy on your build, because you won't be you'll be missing enemies a lot, and thus you'll be missing procs for cast on crit. So it's pretty important to get some accuracy on your gear as well. So the ring and gloves are basically just life, res, and some accuracy. That's what we did for these 2 items. And then for our rare boots, we went for movement speed, life, and res. And then we went for the regen enchant. I'd highly recommend enchanting the boots yourself if you can, because just buying it a pair of boots with the enchant already on it, it's usually kind of expensive. I'd recommend just buying a decent pair of boots and then enchanting it yourself, simply because now in lab you can see the enchants beforehand. So if you go in lab with a few extra helmet bases laying around, you probably can make some money in the process and get your regen enchant relatively quickly with some twice enchanted prophecies. After that, our belt is a elder leather belt. We qualled these with fertile catalyst when it's a normal item, and then use pristine fossils on it until we get decent flat life, decent percent life, and life recovery is a nice bonus on top of that. Ideally, you want a belt with an open suffix so you can craft 12% CDR on the belt. Once you have 12% CDR on the belt, all you need is 1 Abyssal Jewel with 2% CDR. This will take you to 14% cooldown recovery rate, which is the break point that you need to hit to get more procs on your cast on crit. The next break point is all the way at 52% cooldown reduction, which you're only going to get if you have Awakened cast on crit, which is a very expensive upgrade. That's something, if you're really taking the build to the max and you want to really be DPSing bosses, that's something you would look into. So as you can see, all this gear is relatively budget. I don't have anything crazy here. Most of this gear, like the ring and the gloves, for example, and even the boots, all these things were couple C upgrades for me. A 1 alch and a ring. The shield, frankly, cost a couple C to just buy the prophecy and the 1 alch shield. The helmet will be a couple C. I think the Vulconous will eventually be a couple C. At most, this will be a 30 to 40 C item. And then the belt, self-crafting this, that is where it gets a little bit questionable. I think you're going to be in the 10 to 100 C range. If you're just using some pristine fossil spam, it shouldn't take you too long to get a decent belt. And what I'd recommend doing is get yourself 2 belts, so that way if you hit a decent belt, don't roll over that belt. Just start rolling your next belt if you're not happy with it being good enough, because you can always end up in the scenario where you hit a good belt, but you're not happy, and then if you roll over it, you might never get a belt just as good as that previous one. So if you're going to gamble on crafting your own item, I would say getting 2 bases and then just rolling one until you get a decent one, and then if you want a better one, roll a different belt. After that, for the chest piece, this is basically a 2-stat chest piece. It has Guatzalides and the gain maximum life as extra ES mod that you can craft on with Bestiary. This chest piece is really the most expensive part of this, is just getting it 6-linked. Frankly, for you guys, if you don't have enough money to get a 6-link chest piece, just buy yourself a 6-link ambush charge or a 6-link belly of the beast. Those chest pieces should be quite cheap, and they're frankly just about as good as this chest piece is right now, because this is only a 2-stat chest piece, so it's not really that much better than those other choices would be. Eventually, you want to end up getting a chest piece with, you know, better mods on it, like resistances, like even attack or spell crit. Stuff like that will take you a long way in terms of gearing. So if you want to min-max this build and upgrade it, gear I'd recommend going for is like a Torrent's Reclamation would be a good option, getting Tailwind boots, getting gloves with Unnerve on hit, getting a chest piece like this, but actually crafting it the rest of the way, getting a ring with Assassin's Mark on hit. There's ways you can upgrade this build and make it a lot stronger than it is currently, but frankly, I was able to do almost all the endgame content minus the DPS check of the Feared. And, well, I didn't try the Feared, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have enough DPS to do it. And the Breach 4-way. I almost did it. I didn't. I bricked it just barely. I was a little bit away from killing Ultimatum after I'd already killed Tull and Xoph, in which case I would just have Esh left, which I could take him solo pretty easily, because if it's just one Breach Lord, you can tank his attacks. If it's 2 attacking you at the same time, it's a little bit rough. If it's all 4 of them attacking you, it's crazy how easy it is to rip in that fight if you don't instantly DPS them. So this build was capable of doing pretty much everything: Uber Elder, Shaper, Elder, 4-way for Elder Guardians, Shaper Guardians, Maven, 4-way for the synthesis bosses. I think the only thing that this build can't do currently in its really budget state is the Feared and is the 4-way Breach fight. Once you get the gear upgraded more, your DPS is going to go up and you're probably going to be able to do those fights. So I'm relatively confident if you're min-maxing, this is an all-content viable build, but right now with just budget gear, it's almost all-content viable, which Frankly, I was pretty happy with it. I decided to not keep investing into this character because there's other characters I want to build, so I didn't want to go full ham into this build when it's already basically doing all the content I need it to do. So that is my recommendations for gearing here. Other things you can upgrade are things like a Bottled Faith, a Cinder Swallow, stuff like that. Those are multi-X upgrades, but they're also very strong DPS upgrades and would be better results than an Onslaught Flask and stuff like that. So that is what I would recommend for gearing if you want to min-max this build. Also, I didn't say this at the point, but Vol's Vision, if you want a budget helmet, if you can't quite afford Crown of the Inward Eye, this is an option for you as well. After that, looking at the tree setup for gearing, I was just going to go over the jewels real quick. Mods you want to go for are Life, Crit Multi for fire skills, Crit Multi for spell skills, basically just Life and Crit Multi. Occasional attack speed rolls are good as well to get that proc rate up. If you have less attacks per second than 7 attacks per second, then attack speed will still benefit you. For jewels, I would recommend, this jewel is just kind of like whatever. It's a 2-stat jewel. It has, well, I guess it has crit chance on it too. So it's kind of an okay jewel. The important thing about this jewel is that it has cannot be hindered on this. I'd highly recommend this. In Ultimatum League, there's a lot of ultimatums that do hinder effects on you, and this is an invaluable jewel for that, because it basically negates the hinder effect of the Flask hinder and the hinder effect of the Restless Ground. Highly would recommend it. It gives you a lot more options to pick for mods that don't really mess you up while doing the ultimatums. After that, you'll see the rest of my jewels are basically just Life and Crit Multi when I can get them. Life and Crit Multi. I have here the cooldown recovery and attack speed if you crit recently. Not exactly a great jewel. We'd want Life on this ideally, but I didn't get Life because, you know, it was too expensive. You know, I'd rather go with the couple C jewel. Life, all res, attack speed, Crit Multi for fire skills. This is probably one of my best jewels. That one I spent more on, like 30 C, I think. Here we have a Life, Crit Multi with fire skills, and then I had Dex and Int and percent damage. I needed the Dex at the time, so that's why I got this. I don't think I need the Dex now with how I have the tree set up, but I just kept it. I didn't switch it out. And then the most expensive jewel upgrade, and frankly, this will probably hold the value the longest, I think, in terms of expensive upgrades, but very strong upgrades to get, is Glorious Vanity, and you want to get this with the Doryani divine effect to it. This allows us to get Corrupted Soul. Corrupted Soul is very important for sustaining Righteous Fire because it has the important mod of splitting the damage between your life and your ES pool, which means we take half the damage to our ES pool, half the damage to our life pool. This is important because Inquisitor balances the life regen between both our life and our ES pool. So you'll see on the defense mod, we have 1600 life regen here, we have 1400 ES regen here. That is all because of the Pious Path notable on Inquisitor. This mod, it says, Consecrated Ground causes life regeneration to also recover energy shield for you and your allies. So basically it means if you have 1500 life regen, you're also going to have 1500 ES regen. The only reason these two numbers are different on the character sheet is because they just made it so character sheets support the life recovery from your belt. You'll see if I take off this belt, all of a sudden the numbers are the same, 1318, 1318, and so the only difference there is the life recovery from the belt mod. So that is my gearing of the character. Oh, I almost forgot Cluster Jewels. Cluster Jewels, really the only thing you want is Doryani's lesson on the travel notable in terms of being like right on this notable here. The way you can do this is getting Vengeful Commander Doryani's Lessons Jewel. That's what I had previously, and then I got a random Xoph from Betrayal, and I decided to throw it on the Cluster Jewel, and it kind of messed me up in getting Prismatic Heart, which I guess is technically an upgrade, but also I didn't want to have to spend the extra passives to get Doryani's Lessons, but I did anyways. Ultimately, I would just recommend getting Vengeful Commander plus Doryani's Lessons. Shouldn't be too expensive, because these are fairly common outcomes on the jewel, and you'll get Doryani's Lessons on the Travel Notable if you just have that 2-stat jewel, so that way you have Doryani's Lessons here, a 1-stat notable here, and then you go straight to 2 cluster setups. Eventually, I would like to get something like Enduring Composure for endurance charge generation, along with the other thing that gives you crit chance and crit multi while channeling. That was my plan, but I never ended up making that upgrade because it was kind of an expensive jewel, and I was just too lazy to do it. If you can't afford cluster jewels, frankly, you don't necessarily need to. I would unspec out of this whole cluster setup here, and I would just go for the life nodes here, the life nodes here, and then you have a couple extra points to spend for other things like maybe Faith and Steel here. That will do you just fine. You'll frankly have better EHP. You'll be a little bit tankier, but you'll deal a little less damage. So that's the trade-off there for Cluster Jewels. I wasn't entirely convinced this is 100% worth it, so ultimately it's not the end of the world if you cannot get this Cluster Jewel setup. As for an overview of the passive tree, you can see it's pretty much just a breakdown of us going for both percent life, percent ES, and then percent damages where we can, and then crit scaling as well. I will include leveling trees with this so you can have an idea of when to grab what passives, as well as a passive tree with and without the cluster jewel. This will only be for like the level 90 tree, because I wouldn't even go for this cluster setup until you're 90 plus on levels. So that breaks it down for the passive tree. Now looking at the Inquisitor Ascendancy, the nodes you're going to take for the Ascendancy are going to be first Sanctuary, then Pious Path, then you're going to go for Righteous Providence. You're not going to be cast on crit. You're going to level as self-cast until you get Righteous Providence. This is very important because Righteous Providence gets to build a ton of crit, and without it, you're not going to have enough crit chance to really proc cast on crit consistently. So I would wait and play self-cast until you get Righteous Providence. Once you have Righteous Providence, then the last node you're going to get is Instruments of Virtue. This node isn't valuable until you get Vulconous, so if you're just leveling with a rare dagger, this thing you can hold off on. You don't necessarily have to stress about doing the lab right away until you get Vulconous, because the Instruments of Virtue really only gives us damage if you have a weapon like Vulconous with a lot of flat damage already on it. Now looking at Pantheons, I recommend Soul of Solaris, specifically for the one mod that says take no extra damage from crits if you've been crit recently. For Ultimatums, I feel like this is almost crit immunity, because say you get crit at the very beginning of Ultimatum, then you have a 4-second timer where you take no extra damage. So in that 4 seconds, if you get crit again, you restart the 4-second timer. There are so many monsters attacking you. I feel like it's very consistent that you would have this uptime almost 100%. So I think it's very valuable for something like Ultimatum Mechanic. You could also go for Branking for basically not dying to Stunlock. I died to Stunlock here and there, but for the most part, as I geared up, I started to die less and less to Stunlock as my EHP got higher and higher, and I stayed mobile. So I'd highly recommend Solaris. That's my top pick, personally. After that, for the minor gods, we have Ugul currently allocated. That is only because I did this for a reflect map where I ran Ugul, plus Sibyl's Lament gives you basically 100% reduced damage taken from reflect. Really, I recommend Ralakesh because it says cannot be blinded, cannot be maimed, as well as reduced damage taken from bleeding. That's what I normally use. I just had this for a reflect map, and then I forgot about it for basically the entirety of my playthrough since then. So always remember to switch back your Pantheon if you switch it for doing a reflect map. Lessons learned. As for Bandits, we killed... no, we didn't kill all. We helped Alira because she gave us all res and crit multi, which is pretty great for cast on crit. Next up for flasks, we kind of have our cheap flask setup, which is going to be Rumi's Concoction. This will be the most expensive flask. It should be going down in value as the league goes on, but it gives us armor as well as a lot of block. This is really great for surviving ultimatums. With that extra armor, with the armor from our gear, we have quite a decent amount of phys reduction. If we mixed in endurance charges, which we could do with Enduring Composure, we actually have quite a decent phys reduction at that point, and it really helps you get stunned a lot less, and as well as blocking extra damage. Huge for survivability in Ultimatum, would highly recommend. After that, we went with Onslaught Flask with bleed removal. We went with a Quartz Flask, basically for the phasing, because I'm addicted to phasing, I can't help it. A Diamond Flask for we are crit, we want the damage, and then a Quicksilver of Adrenaline. The main things you want are bleed removal and curse removal on these flasks. You don't need any ailment removal because we are ailment immune with Inquisitor. The only time we aren't ailment immune is we are on a 4-second timer. If we're constantly moving over 4 seconds, we will eventually lose our consecrated ground. The good news is, with Purifying Flame cast on crit, we're constantly generating consecrated ground everywhere, so we almost never lose that ailment immunity. The only time you have to worry about this is if you're not casting Purifying Flame and you're walking around, like at the start of the map, if you port in and you instantly start walking around and you never stand still, you need to stand still for a portion, like just a millisecond or whatever, and then you'll get Conk Ground activated. The upgrades to do for the flasks that I'd recommend is eventually you'll want a Bottled Faith and a Cinder Swallow. I would replace both the Bottled Faith for the Onslaught Flask and the Cinder Swallow here, as well as eventually maybe even looking into getting something like an Onslaught Ring or movement speed plus Onslaught on kill. That'll make your mapping feel very, very good, and your damage will be highly upgraded with the Cinder Swallow and with the Bottled Faith because those are huge damage flasks. I didn't get those because they're just too expensive. I was like, and I don't even need them for doing the endgame content I was doing. I think you only really need those flasks for when you start doing stuff like the Feared and stuff like the Hidden Invitation, as those are kind of DPS checks where you really need heavy DPS, or you're just going to get annihilated from all the heavy onslaught of bosses in those arenas. Now we've gone over gearing, let's look at the Gemlink setups we have in the build. To start off with, our damaging setup is Cyclone, linked to cast on crit. Our spell is Purifying Flame. After that, we have links like Fire Pen. Eventually, I'd recommend getting Awakened Fire Pen. It's just a bit more damage, as well as possibly upgrading Inspiration support for Awakened Controlled Destruction. I'm not 100% sure that's the best play, but I think it might be more damage than Inspiration. Not really sure. And we have Elemental Focus. Now you think if we have Elemental Focus, we aren't igniting enemies, therefore we aren't getting the damage from Vulconous, but that's not the case because we are actually igniting with our Arcanist brand setup. We have Arcanist brand linked to Assassin's Mark, linked to Wave of Conviction, linked to Combustion. So this way, Wave of Conviction will ignite the enemy, so we'll get the damage from Vulconous, as well as get the damage from Combustion support, which makes the enemies take minus 19 fire resistance, as well as the exposure effect from Wave of Conviction. So this effectively gives us Elemental Focus, which is a better damage support, while also keeping our ignites in the build for when we need single target. After that, for our movement skills, we have Fortify, linked to faster attacks, linked to shield charge. This is just to give us Fortify. We just shield charge every now and then when we're doing ultimatums. Giving 20% damage reduction from Fortify is massive for survivability. Would highly recommend it. After Flame Dash, for our mana reservation skills, we have Herald of Ash, which gives us a lot of damage. We have Petrified Blood, which allows us to be effective at half-life to get both Pain Attunement for damage, as well as low-life modifiers like the Oak, giving us regen. Our other reservations include Arrogance support, linked to Vitality, linked to Precision. Now, some people often ask me, you have all this extra life pool here, why don't you reserve it? The problem is the reservation gets awkward. Say I take something like Herald of Ash and I link it to Arrogance, I'll reserve 50% of my life, right? So then I would get full effect of this HP pool. But then I have to reserve Precision and Vitality onto my mana pool. But the thing is, these are flat reservations, which means for life, they reserve a lot less, whereas for our mana pool, they reserve a lot more in terms of percentage. So that's why we have to do Arrogance support with Vitality and Precision, and not do other auras like Herald of Ash on there. So that's why we just don't have quite enough reservation space to get a really nice reservation of our life there. After that, we're going to be looking at Purity of Fire. We are using this basically to have damage reduction and more sustain from a Righteous Fire. You can sustain it without this. I actually think my build currently, well, we'll see. I don't think I'm over-capped for Purity of Fire. We'll see real quick. We're almost over. Yeah, we're overcapped for it. You'll see we still sustain without Purity of Fire. It's just not quite as good of sustain. So technically, you could go for a Skitterbots here. You could go for a Flesh and Stone. That would be if you want to go for more defensive against hits and attacks, or if you want to go for more offense. That's up to you. I personally like Purifying Flame for more sustain. But if you want more damage, or you want to mix it up with some other way, there is more reservation space there available for you. After that, we have Portal Gem. This is just simply so I don't have to pick up Portal Scrolls. Would highly recommend it. But if you drop Portal Gem, then you have another gem link, and you can effectively make a better character if you're willing to pick up Portal Scrolls. Now, Righteous Fire and Frost Shield. These are super important. Righteous Fire, with it just constantly on our character, gives us 39% more spell damage, which is massive for damage, as well as it looks cool. So you can't go wrong there. After that, Frost Shield. This gives us, some crit, as well as it gives us damage reduction. Whenever we're taking on a boss, it's pretty simple to take our Frost Shield, pop it up next to the boss, pop our Arcanist brand, and then go spin to win on them. It gives us a nice amount of extra tanking. I highly like it, would recommend it. You can play around with it. If you don't like it, you could go for something like the Black Hole skill. Use that on ultimatums. It's very nice for basically crowd control. Find out what you like, use what you like. You don't necessarily have to go with this. I like it for bossing. Maybe, though, you'd like the Black Hole skill for... Void Sphere. Void Sphere is what it's called. You could use that for ultimatums. It's very nice for crowd control. Up to you on that front. Now, real quick, before I finish off this video, I want to give you guys a quick demonstration of how I would recommend playing the build in order to successfully do ultimatums. I can pretty consistently do T16 ultimatums pretty much all the way to the max every single time. The only barring factor is if you roll a map with double damage mods. Stuff like that will get you to the point where you're gonna start failing every now and then to stun locks. But if you only have one damage mod, you can usually consistently do it, is what I would say. 2 damage mods, it starts to get dicey, and you might want to consider walking away with what loot you have if you get some decent loot in the bank. So, real quick, I'm just going to show you how I do these when I run them. I'm going to put my portal to the side, and I'm going to walk you guys through how I run these trials. Ultimately, I've decided Ruin mechanic. This one where it makes the random monsters hit you with Ruin. This one, for the most part, you can almost always avoid But there was one time when I lost to Ruin, and it was one where I was going towards the 10 encounters, and I was kind of sad about this. So I've stopped picking this, and I've started going for things like Raging Dead. When you play encounters, it's all about moving in a circle. You just shield charge, and you move in a circle. You shield charge, move in a circle, flame dash every now and then to get Arcane Surge, and you move in a circle. That's basically it. Looking at these mods, we're going to go with Raging Den again. I've decided I don't like Stormcaller runes. I feel like these are kind of deadly. I don't really know, but from my experience, I feel like I've been more likely to die when I have Stormcaller runes activated because I think they're more easily to get hit by, whereas Raging Dead, if you're constantly moving, Raging Dead usually doesn't ever hit you. You'll see, we just do the same thing where we just shield charge, move in a circle, shield charge, move in a circle, and we're just doing that the whole time. Choking Miasma, this is one of the ones I like to do because, for the most part, if you're running in a circle, the cloud of chaos damage will just stay in the center of the arena. And with a few different items with chaos res, we can actually get some decent chaos res on the bill. If I gear this character better, I could probably cap chaos res pretty easily, considering the fact I have multiple items that don't have that many stats on it. So we're going to end up upgrading the chaos cloud again, as I go straight through the center through the cloud. Don't recommend doing that. Just keep going around in a circle like this. The only thing where you can't go around in a circle like this is the one that makes you stand in circles. I think those are the hardest to do, in which case you just want to rotate between circles you're standing in, not standing in the circles for too long. That is probably the most rippy out of all the possible ones we could get. I'm going to upgrade the Chaos Cloud all the way. I don't like Lessened Reach because it makes our AoE worse. I don't know if it's that much worse considering Purifying Flame ends up shooting out these waves of damage pretty often. Okay, that was unfortunate. That one didn't go very deep into the waves. We only got like 5 waves there, but you get the point. It's all about constantly moving, shield charging to get your Fortify up, and just go in a circle. That's all you really have to do, and you can consistently do T16 ultimatums all the way to the max for the most part, minus barring the fact if you have a really bad double damage map, then you're going to move into territory where you start to get stun locked, and that feels bad, and you will die to that. So that's how I'd recommend playing T16 ultimatums. Just move in a circle. It's Pie League, man. Embrace it. I just typed /passives as I'm going over the build guide for this character to realize I haven't grabbed the passive from the Way Forward quest. This is a quest that you get the reward in Act 1. My character's level 94. This isn't the first time I've done this. I was playing this whole playthrough of this character without a passive, so that's cool. I mean, I'm done with the character, but I'm going to grab this passive point, okay? And I'm going to put it somewhere, and it's going to be useful. Okay, where can we put this passive point? Where can we put this passive point? Look, Life in ES. Fantastic. I mean, like, I can't believe I did. I always do this. Okay, enough of me ranting. That is the build guide. Hopefully I explained all the gear, all the gem links, and the Pantheon and the Bandits and all that stuff. This character, all in all, has been a very strong character for me. The reality that I've been able to take gear of this level, like I have a chest that is effectively a 2-mod chest, and you know, stuff like that, and I'm able to do almost all the endgame content minus the content that's basically just DPS checks. And if we upgrade the gear further, I believe we could do the DPS checks. I'm very happy with this build's performance. I'd highly recommend it. It's pretty easy. You just spin to win, and for the most part, it does everything well. 10 out of 10 would recommend. This is a strong build, and hope you guys like it. That's the build guide. Thanks for watching. As always, have an excellent one, and I'll see you in the next video.